Hey everyone, how are you? It's Makeda Valletta, also known as the Renaissance Amazon. I'm live on my IG right now, but I'm going to repost this on my YouTube page, the Renaissance Amazon. I hope you all are doing well today. I am reporting live from New York, and I just wanted to do a little talking about my observations in my hometown of New York City. I decided to come to New York on Saturday from Chicago because, of course, watching everything on the news and watching New York on the news was definitely making me nervous for my family. For my parents, you know, my mom is 70, my dad is 77, but I also worried about my twin brother and other people that I know and love in New York. And before I came here, every time my mom told me she left the house to go take a walk or to go to the supermarket, I was like freaking out, you know? I didn't want my parents to leave the house, right? So I came to New York on Saturday. There was about 20 people on my flight from Chicago to New York. And I know one woman was a nurse that was coming, a Chicago nurse who was coming to New York to work, and she had already been here for a few weeks. And there was another man on my flight whose wife was a Chicago nurse who also had come to New York to work. And it was funny because he was coughing on the plane, which was like, I'm like, dude, he kept coughing like 4 or 5 times. Anyhow, in being in New York, you know, the vibe here is not scary, you know? Like, every time I kept telling people I want to go to New York, because I didn't, when everything started to get shut down originally, I didn't know how long it was going to last or how much worse it was going to get, if they were going to try to tell us we couldn't leave our state. You know, and my whole family is on the East Coast, and I really cared about them, and I was freaking out at the thought of, you know, somebody ending up in the hospital and never seeing them again. So I felt like, you know, if I go to New York and make sure my family is taking the herbs that they need to take and eating the food that they need to eat, that they'll be okay. And if I see anybody getting sick, I'm going to revive them out of it because I know how, naturally. But once I got here, I feel like the energy here was very calm, and not like, people here don't seem scared at all. So every time I would tell somebody, you know, I want to go to New York, people would act like they were so scared for me. They'd be like, oh my God, don't go to New York. Like, people were like freaking out. And I'm like, I'm never going to be scared to go to New York. Even 9/11 happened, and I was away in college. I remember that happened on a Tuesday, and I had a hair appointment on a Friday. And I remember telling people I wanted to go home. I was going to New York, and people were freaking out. And I knew then, I'm never going to be afraid to go to my city. That's where my family is. I was born and raised in the borough of Manhattan. I'm never going to be afraid to go to New York. But coming here actually made me feel so much better. Like, when I was in Chicago, I was researching every day, you know, being the science nerd that I am, researching the virus. If you haven't seen my videos on that, definitely check them out on my page, The Body Scientist 81, because I do give a lot of advice on how you can keep your immune system strong. And also a lot of information about this virus that we're not being told. But I was just obsessively researching and listening to Governor Cuomo every day, listening to the news, paying attention to what was happening around the world. But since I've been in New York, I've actually not been doing all those things. I've been paying attention a little bit, but not as much as I was when I was in Chicago. And the vibe here seems like New Yorkers have like a keep it moving mentality, right? And I feel like it's still here. Like, I haven't been downtown in Times Square, but Times Square is mostly tourists anyway. So when you see an empty Times Square, that makes sense, because New Yorkers never hung out in Times Square. That was tourists. So we don't have tourists now, so you don't see people in Times Square. But in Harlem, Washington Heights, where I live, it's so funny. I walked 11 blocks to a friend's house, and I see people outside in front of the bodega talking shit, no mask on, talking shit like how New Yorkers do in front of the bodega. I go in a bodega, there's people in the bodega standing there having a conversation who are not buying anything, because you have people in New York who will stay in the bodega talking shit, but they're not even like buying anything. Still happening. And I'm in the zip code where it's supposed to be the highest percentage of COVID positive people in my zip code in Manhattan. But yet, when you go outside, there isn't a vibe of like being scared, you know, at all. And it seems actually very normal here. And I was freaked out because the building that my parents live in It's 14 floors, like about 7 to 8 apartments on each floor. So at first I was telling my mom I was afraid for them to get in the elevator. I'm like, don't get in the elevator with kids. Like I was just like, oh my God, oh my God. But since I've been home for about 6 days now, every time I've gotten on the elevator, there's 2 elevators in our building. Every time the elevator comes, there's nobody on it, okay? In the past, there would be people on the elevator. Also, I was at my friend's building, 1 elevator, never anybody on the elevator. So somehow it works out, you know, but I didn't want to be on the elevator with people. But New York has an amazing energy because I feel like other people outside of New York are more afraid than people in New York. And it's almost like you wouldn't even be able to tell that it was this bad if you didn't watch it on the news, right? The parks, New York never closed their parks. So Chicago closed their lakefronts, beaches, and parks weeks ago, even though there's still people on it in my neighborhood, but they did close it. New York never closed the parks and beaches. And, you hear me? Okay. So people are mad at Florida for not closing their beaches, but New York's parks are equivalent to Florida's beaches. We have a serious park culture in New York, and so many people go to the park, especially when it's warm. All the parks be lit. So a couple days ago, I went to Riverside Park by my house, and there was mad people outside. People were riding bikes, people were rollerblading, people were doing kickboxing in the corner, people were working out in the grass. What else are people doing? They were sitting by the water, walking their dogs, sitting there playing music. Like, it was lit in the parks. And a lot of people had a mask, and everybody did, but nobody seemed scared. It wasn't a vibe of like, oh my God, we're about to die. Oh my God, you know, it really wasn't like that. And I feel like in New York, if you try to close the parks, like, people would really go crazy because we have a serious park culture. We always did. And it's like, people need an outlet so they don't lose their mind. And in New York, we have a lot of people who share apartments. You know, a lot of people have a lot of roommates. So that's also an easy way for something to spread. But yeah, like, the vibe here, and because we have so many bodegas and delis and they're all open, you always are still gonna have that movement. But I feel much better that I came back to New York. Like, now I'm not so paranoid of like my mom leaving the house or my dad leaving the house. And my mom's best friend, she's like 71. She lives a couple blocks away. I was going to take her because she wanted my mom to take her to BJ's or something, right? And last week. And my mom told her best friend, I can't take you because my daughter doesn't want me to leave the house, because I was scolding my mom for going anywhere. And so, so my mom, since I'm here, I told my mom, I'll take your friend. And her friend laughed at that and said to my mom, she sees us as little old ladies, and she's like laughing, right? She's 71, and she's not scared or feeling like she can't go to the store and do what she needs to do. So the energy in New York is a very tough one and a very positive one regardless. Like, we're not scared. And maybe that's the reason why it's so bad here, but probably not. I think it's really because we just have a very social culture. People will say New Yorkers don't talk to you, but that is not true. New Yorkers will talk to you in a second, engage you in a second. You see conversations happening all the time on the street because we have street vendors, because we have so many bodegas. Like, and we talk to each other. Like, just like, you know, New Orleans has an intimate culture. Sometimes you have to look at a culture of a city to understand how it got so bad. New Orleans has an intimate culture. New Orleans, people come in and out of New Orleans constantly, just like New York, constantly. Every 2 months, New Orleans has a big festival. You got Mardi Gras, you got Jazz Fest, you got Essence Fest, you got Halloween, you got everything else in between that happens in New Orleans, okay? Italy and Spain, very kissy, touchy-touchies, you know? So when you have cultures like that, you know, it's more likely to spread. But I feel like the energy in New York is not like some scared, paranoid energy. And there's actually a lot more people outside than I thought. I was actually surprised. A lot more people outside than I thought. And when I see people in my neighborhood outside, staying in front of bodega talking, not social distancing, and no mask, I'm like, maybe that's why it's so high here. I don't know. But definitely when you get in the taxis in New York, in the Ubers, they have, like, you know, the plastic divider, and you know, you go into the bodegas now, they have a plastic divider, like dividing everything. Some of them have a tape telling you to stay back. But the way that New York bodegas work, there's always been multiple transactions going on at once. Like, you could have 2-3 people putting money on the table, making transactions. So we never used to wait in line and have all this. So it's like the way New York culture is, you know, it could be tough. But one thing I like, there's a man who lives in my parents' building who every time he sees me, he talks my ears off. Every time he sees me, he starts to want to hug me and tell me how he wants to marry me and take me in your suitcase to wherever you're going and all this shit that he talks. And I'm always grinning and trying to be nice. But yesterday, I was coming in the building and I had my mask on. He had his mask on. And it was so dope to see him, and he couldn't say a whole bunch of shit to me. He couldn't get in my face, and he couldn't try to hug me. And I was like, yes. So that's the good thing about this, is that, you know, dudes that be doing too much, talking too much, coming too close, you know, now you have the perfect excuse to keep them back, for real, for real. So I enjoy that about the situation. I imagine it has to be hard dating at this point or meeting new people, because especially in New York, everybody's walking around with masks on. So you'll see a dude with a hood and a mask. You don't know what people look like. It's interesting. Anyhow, I just wanted to report from New York. I'm thankful that my family's okay. I do know a lot of people that have lost people, but I also know a lot of people who haven't. New York has like 8.5 million people, so a lot of people are going to be affected. A lot of people are not going to be affected. I just want to make sure that my family is good. And this is the reason why we all have to act like, well, this is the video for tomorrow. I'm going to talk about why we all have to act like we have the virus or are surrounded by it, because it's not going to be over in a few months, okay? And it's important to keep your immune system strong regardless, okay? That's the video for tomorrow. But I just wanted to talk about what I was observing in New York. And I always felt like New Yorkers were super friendly and helpful to each other. So even with all of this, like if I drop something, New Yorkers will pick it up and give it to me. And you know, nobody's fighting over, getting to a certain space, or one person's walking, somebody else will step aside and be like, go ahead. We're very civil people in New York, okay? I love New York. I love my city. I really do. And I'm happy to be here. I feel good being here. When I go back to Chicago, I just not being able to go into the park is a problem for me, so I hope they open the damn parks, because that's important. But yeah, New York, I felt like it's standing strong throughout this, and it doesn't feel nearly as bad as it is when being in New York, actually. Like it felt way worse to me when I was in Chicago watching on the news than it does when I'm here. Maybe it's giving me a false sense of security, I don't know, but the vibe in New York is not some scared, paranoid, oh my God, we're about to die, we're living in the middle of a pandemic epicenter. That's not the vibe here. I was talking to a neighbor, he was telling me about how he used to live in Texas, and all his friends from Texas have been texting him, calling him like crazy. Yeah, I saw him in the hallway just chilling, like, nobody is really tripping. It's quite interesting. Anyhow, people, enjoy your day, and if you haven't seen my videos on my page, The Body Scientist 81, where I talk a lot about the immune system and the things that you really need to know and do so you can stay healthy and strong, not just through this pandemic situation, but period, okay? It's not the last time we could be exposed to some crazy infectious disease. So it's important to stay healthy. That's like the most important thing that you have. You can't be waiting for someone to come save you or a doctor to come save you. You want to stay out of the hospital. So take care of yourselves, people, okay? All right, have a good day. Bye.